The boss fight has long been a staple of the video games industry. More than just a tougher enemy at the end of a stage, the boss battle was a way for developers to show off what they were capable of. It was also a way to challenge the player, forcing them to use everything that they had learned in that level to take down a massive foe. The new game NanoApostle doesn't bother with creating long levels or taking you on a grand adventure, and that's because it's entirely focused on these boss fights, one after another, all while a little girl pieces together the memories and becomes a real badass fighter. That's pretty cool, but the question remains, are boss fights alone enough to make this action game worth playing? Well, that's what we're about to find out when I review NanoApostle by 18 Light Game Limited. The developers would like to call NanoApostle a boss rush game, but for most players, there's not a whole lot of rushing involved. This is the kind of game where you could, in theory, beat it in maybe an hour or two. But will you? Probably not. Instead, you'll be introduced to a boss, spend a bunch of time learning its patterns and weaknesses, and then replay that fight until you gain the upper hand and finally win. After you do that, you'll move on to the next fight and, you guessed it, do the whole thing all over again. Of course, that's the charm of this type of game. It wants each battle to feel a little bit hopeless at the start. That way you'll get the satisfaction of seeing improvements as you slowly inch closer and closer to defeating your opponent. It hopes that you'll stick around long enough to try out different strategies and use a variety of augmentations to win the fight. And for those patient enough to master the moves and parry the attacks, you'll bathe in the glow of success. But don't get too comfortable, because the next fight is going to be even harder. Now, there is a story here, but it's clearly not the priority. You play a young girl named Anita who mysteriously wakes up in a futuristic biochemical weapons lab without any memories of who she is or even where she came from. She's immediately introduced to what is elegantly described as a semi-autonomous combat nanoprosthetic known as Apostle, which is there to help turn Anita into a real fighting hero. The two of them, along with another young woman, Winnie, will work together to solve the boss problem and, if they're lucky, get a history lesson through a series of devastating flashbacks. What you need to know is that there was a special program set up by the military to create nanomachines that could be equipped to soldiers to make them bigger and better and faster and more powerful. This is what Anita is going to need to use in order to gain the upper hand in the 6 challenging boss fights. She'll start out with only a couple of these expansion modules to choose from, and maybe 1 or 2 spots to place them in. As she goes about defeating the bosses, she'll unlock more slots and augments. You see, there are 24 of these enhancements overall, but only 7 slots to fit them in. This means that you're going to have to make some really tough decisions about what you need in each fight. You'll find that while many will boost your strength and abilities, they'll often come with some sort of side effect. For example, there's one that'll increase the size of your weapon, but will decrease the speed of your attack. Another augment will allow you to gain more energy, but your dash move will have a much longer cooldown. What you'll quickly realize is that there's no one-size-fits-all for the enhancements, because what you'll need is going to change from one boss to another. Although there are really only 6 bosses to fight, each one is wildly different from the last. Sure, you may be able to defeat one through sheer willpower and aggression, but the next one will require a lot more strategy. You may have to stay back and wait for the right time to pounce. One of my favorite battles will use your fears against you, adding a whole new gauge to the game. This is a spooky fight that can actually get inside our hero's head if given the chance. How you go about battling this foe is completely different from what you need from the last fight. It really forces you to relearn the strategy every single time. What I really like about this game is how it's constantly rewarding the player with new moves and abilities. Beyond the different augments, there's a surprising amount of depth to the simplistic gameplay. A lot of the game revolves around hacking and slashing with a light attack, all while filling up your energy gauge to let you infect the enemy from afar. These two attacks work in concert, as you'll need to hack away at the enemy in order to fully infect them, something that'll lead to them losing a lot of health very quickly. What you want to do is parry as many attacks as possible, which will often stagger or even stun the opponent, giving you a chance to really get in there and get some free hits. You'll also use a grappling hook to take off even more damage, along with 2 different types of charge attacks. And yes, all of this gets augmented in different ways when you add the various modules. A lot of the game comes down to learning and memorizing just how to use these different moves to their fullest. Now, while NanoApostle doesn't exactly have levels per se, it does have a number of training missions that are the next best thing. These are short obstacle courses that'll either have you dodging or fighting your way through a series of increasingly difficult stages. While they don't really add anything to the story or the lore, the stages are a good way to mine for experience points that you'll end up using to buy the different augments. They're also just a nice change of pace from all the boss slaying. Now, while I ultimately enjoyed this game, I did wish there maybe was a little bit more to it. The 6 bosses are all unique and fun to figure out, but there just aren't enough of them. This is a game that really would have benefited from having maybe 3 or 4 more bosses. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 of them that were as big as the beast at the start of the game. I mean, don't get me wrong, while some of the later bosses are certainly cool looking, the game never really goes as big and over the top as you might initially expect, and that's a shame. I'm also not a huge fan of the arenas that we fight in. I guess I was hoping for the same kind of variety that we saw from the bosses themselves. But instead what we get are a lot of bland, dark, and boring stages that don't really do much world building. All of that is left for the lackluster story bits, which include a lot of reading and some disappointing cinemas. Look, I do like the throwback pixel graphics, and some of the boss designs are truly inspired, but I gotta say, NanoApostle is surprisingly restrained. The good news is that the boss fights are memorable and satisfying. The game is just challenging enough to make you feel a real sense of accomplishment with every single win. Some of them will be hard fought and really come down to who can get the final hit in. That's genuinely thrilling, especially in those final few stages. For those who enjoy sharpening their teeth by playing through different types of stages, those genuine thrills might be a little bit too far apart to keep you interested. However, if you're looking for a challenging boss rush game with a cool science fiction story and stylish enemies to dismantle, then you could do a whole lot worse than NanoApostle. If you're the type of person who wants to cut out all the filler and get straight to the good stuff, then NanoApostle is for you. By ditching the usual stage designs, this thrilling new action game focuses on the one thing you're here for: the boss fights. With a surprising amount of depth to the gameplay and stylish enemies with 2 different forms each, NanoApostle really is a rewarding experience. That said, it could use a few more bosses and more interesting stage designs. Those complaints aside, though, this is a solid action game with a fun science fiction setting and at least 2 of the best boss battles of the year. Just don't expect to rush through this boss rush game. Hey, thanks for watching my review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every single day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What game has the coolest bosses? Oh, there's so many good ones to choose from, including the whole Mega Man series. That's something that's built on the boss battles. Or I don't know, maybe you'll go a completely different direction. Honestly, I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back later this week with more reviews and even a review crew episode. Who knows, maybe Nintendo will actually announce something this week. They're due. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.